Well, already gang, welcome back to the Active Self Protection Podcast. I am yet again your host, and as always, I remain your
The
favorite.
Storm Hunter WX weather app is free to download and use and provides you with warning of severe weather even before the National Weather Services issue alerts. This advanced weather app is an important tool for awareness of severe weather that I use every day. Download and use it totally free without in-app purchases on iOS or Android at the link below.
Former Fed with me today, a new friend of mine. His name is Mike. Mike is from Southern California, and he is married with two adult sons. Mike, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. Thank you, Mike. How are you?
I am well. This will be one of the times when I don't have any problem remembering the guest name. That'll be easy this time. That's a gimme.
Right.
So, Mike wrote in and gave me some or most of the story he's going to talk about. And as always, if you're listening to this and you don't know if the story that you potentially have is worth being on the show, you won't know until you email me at mike at activeselfprotection.com and we'll find out. A lot of the stories, as you've heard, if you listen, aren't always knockdown, drag out, bang, bang, whoop de doo, incidents. Sometimes they're someone avoided a thing, and that's a great lesson. So hit me up if you have a story. With that said, Mike, you are obviously a self-defense minded person. You watch Active Self Protection, you listen to the podcast. Has this always been something sort of in the forefront of your head, something you always considered, or did it come about as a result of some sort of incident?
No, not really. I mean, I when I first bought my home about like 30 years ago, I got a gun, to protect the home. But growing up as a kid, we never had guns in the house. My mom was adamantly against guns. I don't think she was like anti two-way, but she was just very much afraid of guns. So we never had any guns in the home, and that was never even like a thing. So it didn't even become guns didn't even become a part of my life until after I was grown and out of the house and had my own home. So yeah, like I said, when I bought this home about 30 years ago, I got a gun to protect it, but I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a self-defense minded person even then because I just had the gun. It stayed at home. I never, for instance, carried it. And I live in California, so up until like the Bruin decision, it was virtually impossible to get a CCW permit in California. So I never even tried because I knew it was going to be rejected. I had to be able to show some sort of special, good cause to have it. And I didn't have it. I had never been the victim of, an armed robbery or anything like that. So I wouldn't really consider myself necessarily a self defense minded person until about 4 years ago, I guess during COVID, I actually, for the first time, got myself a rifle, an AR-15. And after I got that, I became interested in training. So I started taking a lot of training classes and stuff. And the more I learned and the more proficient I became with that, the more interested I became in guns. And I joined the local gun club and just started training like crazy within the past, like 3 or 4 years, so much so that I ran out of like classes to take. So I started taking instructor classes, and now I'm a certified instructor, not because I necessarily, intended to do that for a living, but I just love to train. And so I'm taking all the classes. I've taken like stop the bleed classes and instructor classes and all sorts of stuff. So in the last like 2 or 3 years, yeah, I have very much so developed a self defense mindset.
Yeah, you're not alone in the COVID being the impetus for you to start thinking about this stuff. I think a lot of people across the country, maybe around the world, I don't know, but certainly in the United States, a lot of people kind of saw, as I like to say, the sort of thin veneer of civilization, of polite society, and how that can go south really quickly depending on the circumstances.
Yeah.
When you see people filling shopping carts with 12 racks of toilet paper, that's a sign that things aren't entirely going the way we would hope. And yeah, it doesn't take much. We had a guy on recently, excuse my earpiece is bugging me. Had a guy on recently, and his story was just him retelling the events of his experience during the riots in LA back in '92, and that's another example of that same exact sort of thing. So your incident we're going to talk about today happened about how long ago?
It was last summer, so not even a year ago.
Okay, and want to just walk us through it? I won't tee you off too much. You just kind of tell the story in your own words, however you like.
Okay, yeah. So I had ordered some takeout from a local restaurant. It was for pickup, so I went to the restaurant to go pick up my meal, and the this restaurant is located in like kind of a strip mall, a corner strip mall. And there's a 7-Eleven there. There's like a marijuana dispensary. So it's a very small but popular strip mall. So it's got a parking lot, but it's a small parking lot, and it's almost always packed. So I pulled into this parking lot to try and find myself a place to park. And as I'm pulling in, and there's only like one like thoroughfare to drive through the parking lot, and then there's parking on each side of the parking lot. And as I'm driving down the one lane, I see a couple spots up in front of me. There's a guy backing out of a spot, so I'm like, "Oh, goody! I'll get a parking spot." So I stop and I'm waiting for him to back out so I can take his spot. And then the car behind me starts honking like he wants me to, go ahead. And I'm waiting for my spot, so I just, kind of sat there. And after honking a few more times, the guy behind me, he pulls his car up right next to me, and his windows are down, and my window is down. And he's telling me that his girlfriend, I'm blocking her in, and she's trying to get out of a parking spot. And so I explained to him, I'm like, there's a guy just ahead of us who's pulling out. As soon as he backs out, I'll pull in, I'll park my car, and I'll be out of your way, and I'll be out of your girlfriend's way.
Seems reasonable. Yep.
And but that wasn't good enough for him. He's like, no, you got to move now. And, I'm not going to get into a fight with the guy. And I could see that he was being unreasonable. So I just proceeded to ignore him, and just waited for the guy in front of me to pull out so I could take his spot. And, within a matter of seconds, he did that. He pulled out. I pulled in. I figured that's the end of it. Right. So I, park. I turn off the ignition. Well, I roll up the windows. I turn off the ignition. And I hear from behind me the guy saying, "I'm gonna have to put a hole in a guy." Right? He didn't say guy. He used the N word, um, but I
Okay.
mean, not in a racist way, because we're both black men. It was just it's like a figure of speech kind of
Right.
thing. Um,
Okay.
but when I heard him say he's going to put a hole in someone, and I kind of figured he was referring to me, I look up in my rearview mirror and I see that he's parked. He's blocking me in. He's parked right behind my car, and he's getting out of his car. So, given what he said as he was getting out of a car, I had a pretty good idea that I was about to find myself in a gunfight. Right?
Yeah.
So like immediately, I started thinking, what am I going to do here? And I did not want to be sitting in my car when he walked up on me, presumably with a gun out. So I immediately got out of my car and turned to face him, not because I was looking for a gunfight, but if I'm going to be in a gunfight, I want to be standing up, not sitting in a car.
Sure. And by the way,
Um,
just like with cops, for a civilian, being sitting in your car in a situation like that is potentially it's your casket. So yeah, absolutely, don't sit in your car if something like that's going on. If you can't escape, I mean,
yeah, because I would have had to, turn around from a seated position, shoot through a closed window, and I just did not feel like that would be the best position to be in. So I immediately, like I said, I immediately got out of the car and I turned to face him, not in a threatening way, because I'm not trying to escalate it. But if it's going to be a gunfight, not a fun fight. If it's going to be a gunfight,
right,
I want to give myself, a fighting chance. So I got out
sure,
and I turned to face him, and he, walked up to me, very aggressively and saying some nonsense about how I disrespected him, and he's a grown man and how I need to respect him. And I really wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to what he was saying. What I was doing is, like I say, I watch your channel, you guys' channel quite a bit. And one of the things that there were a lot of things that John says that were going through my mind that day. And one of those was, the eyes may be the windows to the soul, but the hands are the windows to the intent. So I
hmm
wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention to what he was saying. What I was doing is paying a lot of attention to his hands, because he had already said he was, planning to shoot me, basically. And when
right,
he walked up on me, his hands were empty. So, and I had my gun in my waist, and since his hands were empty, I didn't show it, I didn't pull it, but I kept my eyes on his hands. And the minute those hands went for his waist, I was going to assume that he was going to pull a gun, and I was going to assume that it was loaded, and I was going to assume that he planned to shoot me with it. So I kept my eyes. I mean, my eyes directly were looking at his face, but my attention was in my peripheral vision, and I was in my peripheral vision. I
mm,
was paying attention to his hands. And the minute his hands moved towards his waistline, I was going to draw and shoot. But fortunately, that didn't happen. He didn't make a move. He just kind of like rattled off what he had to say. And again, one of the things that John always says is, what we want to be good, sane, sober, moral, prudent people, and do what we can to de-escalate. If we can. So
Mhm.
I wasn't going to bark back at the guy. I wasn't arguing back at him. I just kind of stood there and let him say whatever it is he felt like he needed to say. Meanwhile, keeping my attention on his hands the whole time. And and the reason I wore this shirt today is because this is the shirt I had on at that time. And as he walked up to me, this shirt doesn't necessarily scream, I'm a gun guy and I've got a gun in my waist,